Hello, and welcome to this episode of a walkthrough of how to practice, repeat, and count. So what we have here on the screen is about 100 randomly generated questions. And we're going to take these randomly generated questions and we're going to apply the repeat and count framework to each of them. We're going to go through all the different ways of repeating, all the different ways of counting. If you haven't had an opportunity to understand all of those things, go check it out on our repeat and count video, or how to speak confidently without a script. You will learn the repeat and count methodologies from those videos. And so what we're going to do is, we're not going to go through all 100 questions, but we're going to do all the questions that end in the number 1. And we're going to practice all the different combinations of repeat and count to learn each of those techniques on their own, but also to learn to disguise repeat and count so that we don't sound like a script following robot when we're answering questions. If we can do that, we get all the benefits that repeating and counting provides with none of the downsides. And we can sound very clear and professional despite great pressure when we present in an unprepared fashion. So let's start with the first one. So question number 1, and I'm going to use the word and summary detail framework for this one. So, would you invest in a bakery? Invest. In short, no. And I can provide more details as to why I'm hesitant in investing in a bakery. And if we just stop there, that would be the use of repeat and count. I could go into more details, and it would be subject to the person providing me more details and if they want me to continue. Let's go to question 11, and this time I'm going to use the word and then do a more complete presentation with the one hand, other hand response. So, what does the ideal birthday celebration look like? Ideal birthday. Well, on the one hand, we could look at what my ideal birthday looks like, and on the other hand, we can look at what, say, the ideal birthday celebration is for someone else, like my wife. So my ideal birthday celebration would involve a low-key event where I would invite only people who I really get a lot of energy from, rather than all the people who are really important in my life. I would invite close personal friends. I would invite my wife. No offense, but I would probably get my kids to be babysat that day. And the ideal birthday celebration for me would be doing things I don't get to do a lot during the year, which is catch up with really important lifelong friends. But on the other hand, some people enjoy a much bigger celebration for their birthday, especially if it's a significant birthday. And so if my wife was, say, celebrating her 40th, it's one of two ways it could go. One is that she could invite 200, 300, 400 people and make it a big celebration and enjoy all of the energy and the social gatherings that comes from hosting a big event like that. Alternatively, I know that for my wife's 40th, she might do something completely different, which is treat herself to something that she might not otherwise get to do every other year, like go on a girls' trip to Japan. And so when I think of what the ideal birthday celebration looks like, I think more often than not, it's about doing the things you don't often get to do with the people that mean a lot to you that you don't always get to see. And that's my attempt at using question 11, using the word and then the one hand, other hand. And as you can see, when I go one hand, other hand, I can take the best of both answers for my final answer. It's a slightly longer, less abrupt version than the word summary detail structure. It also lets you be very diplomatic for a long period of time in your speech before ultimately coming to a conclusion. And that has its pros and cons. What I would invite you to do is do this yourself now. Go to question 21, and I want you to use a framework that you're familiar with. Here I'm about to use the word, problem, options, solution methodology. So before, you can pause the video and have a go at, for question 21, doing a word and then problem, options, solution methodology. And then you can resume the video and compare your response to my response. So you can pause the video now, but here I go. And this is my attempt at something you can compare your attempt to. So would you rather unlimited travel or unlimited books? What would I rather? Well, I'm going to go through the problems, the options, and then ultimately which one are things that I would pick. So the problem with having unlimited travel is that it would be exhausting. And so when traveling a lot gives you access to opportunities like going to different countries, experiencing different cultures, but it comes at the cost of your health because you can't prepare meals for yourself at home. But it also comes at the cost of exhaustion because you're constantly in airplanes, on the move, walking, lugging around heavy things. There are some things that we can do to make unlimited travel a really fantastic option. One of the options is to travel really lean. The other option is to always have like a sort of a house to settle into. And so what I would choose ultimately to do if I was having if I had a ticket that just let me travel anywhere in the world, I would try to be hyper organized. I would try to only eat healthy meals, try not to live off of vending machines and rubbish and things like that. And I would make sure that I'm not just hopping from hotel to hotel. I'm developing friends and relationships, and first traveling to places where I can have a more comfy place to stay, so I don't feel like I'm constantly getting kicked out and exhausted on the move. Now, if we look at comparing this to, say, the difference between unlimited travel versus unlimited books, I'm instantly less excited by the concept of unlimited books. In this day and age, I feel like I already have access to unlimited books. And so if I think about the problems associated with having access to unlimited books, instantly I'm thinking, where am I going to store them all? And if they're ebooks, then I guess I've already got that. And so the options I have would be, if I've got unlimited books, some way I could make the use of it would be to use that as a business enterprise. So instead of having all of these books to read, which I'll never do, I could try selling them, or I could try giving them away to charity. And so if I had to pick an option between those two options, I might give unlimited books to charity. I'm sure there's no shortage of underprivileged schools, communities, libraries that could use a lot of free content and things where especially internet access for everyone might be really limited. And so that would be an interesting thing to do. But if I had to choose between unlimited travel and unlimited books, I think I would get more enjoyment, and I think the world would also get more benefit if I had the ability to travel without penalty or fee. There you go. And so you can compare your answer to me using the word problems, options, solution strategy. That's a particularly lengthy answer, and that's always the downside of problem, options, solutions. The benefit is that you give people a very persuasive, professional, but long sort of answer. And that's the downside, is that it can be quite long, especially when you're comparing two different ideas. However, I guess what goes to show is that that was a lot of content that I was able to develop with no prior preparation. And even though it was long, it still came out very professional and clear. And so that's a lot of delivery that I was able to do, a fairly long speech I was able to do without any prior preparation, thanks to the benefit of this automatic structure. If we go to level 31, I'm now going to use the sentence repeat instead of the word. And then I'm going to go back to summary detail. So before I have a go, I recommend that you do question 31, pause me, have a go, and then compare your answer to mine. So here I go. Would you rather design a city or an amusement park? I would rather design an amusement park than a city. Very quickly, I think a city is very complicated. An amusement park would be a lot more fun. Would you like more details? And that's my answer to that. So interesting to see how you would have gone with that selection. I made an intuitive knee-jerk reaction answer, and I defended it confidently. And that's really the benefit of using both the sentence structure and the summary detail structure. It's a concise answer. The answer is confidently presented up front, inviting the audience to ask you to elaborate, which gives you more time to think. If we move on to question 41, I'm going to use the sentence and the one hand, other hand structure. This is a very well-balanced structure, combination of not being too concise, not being too long, being very diplomatic, giving an answer fairly quickly, but also being diplomatic and coming up with a sensible conclusion at the end. This is probably the most, if we're talking about things that are small, medium, or large, this is the most medium, the most Goldilocks of all the structures. So have a go at this yourself, the sentence, one hand, other hand structure for question 41. pause me, have a go, compare my answer I'm about to give to yours. Here I go. Would you invest in a podcast network? I would be intrigued to invest in a podcast, but there are two things that I would need to know before I make such an investment. The first thing would be whether that podcast has any financial upsides to it, because if I'm going to invest time and money into things, I want a return on that investment. But on the other hand, I want to know the people who are involved, because if I'm not working with a good team, then even if it is profitable, it'll be stressful and it'll be not worth my time. And so in more detail, in order to know that a podcast is financially stable, I would like to look at how long it's been running for. I would like to see if it's continuously gaining more subscribers and followers year on year. If it's a podcast network, I'd like to see all the different offerings it has, how often it adds new offerings, whether a bad offering spoils the bunch, or whether or not it just always is a growing idea, like audible.com, where adding new content to it is always like a good thing. And so these are sort of the financial considerations. I want to look at growth, I want to look at expansion, new offerings, and whether it's able to keep and grow its customer base. And then the next thing I'd look at is the people. And so I want to see if it's a small team, if it's a big team, if it has how long they work for, and what kind of personalities are involved. I'd like to get to know people first. If there's anyone in particular where the whole podcast is really run off the authoritative person who is very inflexible and not open to say ideas I might have or I've been asked to bring in, then that could be a potential red flag for me. So all in all, I would be interested in investing in my own podcast network, provided it was financially stable and I liked the people who are working there. Cool, so compare your answer to mine. We're moving on to question 51. We're now doing sentence, problem, option, solution. So we know that problem, option, solution has the upside of being a very persuasive and very comprehensive answer, with the downside of taking a long time to get to the answer, while also being sometimes a bit verbose. And so on this occasion, I'm going to try to be very concise with my problem, option, solution. I'm also going to try to give an answer up front so that I can reduce both potential downsides of using problem, option, solution. So have a go yourself and compare your answer to mine. Here I go. Would you rather never again do laundry or dishes? I would definitely rather never have to do the dishes. I don't mind doing laundry. So the problem with doing dishes is that, unlike doing clothes, dishes are way messier. I have 2 toddlers and I absolutely hate having milk that's been left in a bottle or a yogurt can for so long that it becomes moldy and green. It smells bad. It gets on my fingers. It gets into my skin. It never leaves my skin. And also things like plates that have been left too long, wine glasses where a little bit of red wine or something is like caked on the bottom of the thing and it's a delicate glass, so I can't rub too hard. But I have to also dig it out to make it clean. It doesn't go on the dishwasher. All of these things are enormous problems for me, which make me never want to do dishes again. And so the options that would be available to me if I had to minimize how frustrating dishes were, would be, one, I could hire someone to do the dishes on my behalf. That would be expensive, but it would completely outsource the problem. Or the second thing I could do is completely reshuffle around my kitchen so that everything, with no exception, goes straight in the dishwasher. That way, everything can be cleaned without me having to do any manual intervention. And that's what I would recommend doing. I think instead of hiring someone to wash my dishes on a regular basis, I might hire someone maybe from like the Marie Kondo method or something like that, to help me make a really clutter-free, hyper-systemized dishes kitchen, using stuff that I know will last and not be wrecked by a dishwasher. It's nice, but it can still be stored. It's not too big, so it can fit. And I would make all of these little adjustments so that I have a highly optimized house where the house works for me, not the other way around. And so that's an attempt at my answer. Interesting to compare it to yours. Let's go over to question 61. Now, this time we're going to do the clarify in 2 and then I'm going to do summary detail. This is an interesting combination, especially when I'm doing it myself. It's better to have someone to ask questions to. So I'm going to try and split this question in 2 ways. There's lots of different, without even looking at the question, there's a few ways that we can split, as we know. We can do head and heart splits, like my heart's telling me I want to do this, my head's telling me I should do this. There's big and small, like, do you mean if I had a big business or a small business? There's me and you, like, do you mean how this applies to me or how this applies to someone else? We can do it geographically. Do you mean if this was done locally, if this was done internationally? We can do past and present. Do you mean how this applied in the past or how this might apply in the future, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A really good one for retaining flexibility is how it applies to me versus how it applies to others, or like how this applies generally versus how this applies in a specific situation. Those 2 are going to be very universal, and I'm going to try to use those for the purposes of this demonstration. So I'm going to do question 61. I'm going to try to do me, you, or general specific clarifiers, and then I'm going to do summary and detail for the first one. So you have a go at doing that yourself, and then compare with my answer. Here we go. Question 61. Would you invest in a plant nursery? So just to clarify, are you asking if I personally would invest in a plant nursery, or would you prefer to know if I think that plant nurseries are objectively good things for people to generally invest in? And say someone wants to know if I want to personally invest in a nursery. Okay, so I would not personally invest in a nursery because I don't know enough about plants or that business. But if you'd like me to have a go at thinking about what I'd need, I'm happy to provide that detail. There you go. Summary detail is famously short, concise, confident, and the clarifying 2 is really powerful because it's a way of sort of showing your expertise or an answer without having to actually give an answer. It's quite insightful to be able to say, there's a better question here. Is it my view on a nursery, or is it more mathematical, objective view of a nursery? And that's a helpful clarification, gives you time to think all the benefits that we know come with repeat and count. On to question 71. I'm going to do clarify in 2, again using me, you, or general specific, and I'm going to use a one hand, other hand. This is another really powerful middle of the road structure. It almost works every time. And it gives you a fairly medium long answer that's not too concise, not too long, and you can also give answers up front instead of having to wait for the end of a presentation. So have a go yourself, compare it to mine. Here I go. Question 71. What makes a perfect workplace? Just to clarify, you're asking about what my perfect workplace is, or what someone else's perfect workplace might be. So say they ask me for what someone else's perfect workplace might look like. Okay, so there's workplaces are different depending on who you are. I'm going to give you 2 extreme examples. So the perfect workplace for someone who is a maker of things, and the perfect workplace for someone who is a manager of people. So if you're a maker of things, you have to sit down, you have to be uninterrupted, and you need to, it might take you an hour, it might take you 10 years. You have to get something done. Your perfect workplace would presumably be absolutely free from distractions. We're talking like an office with a lockable door. We're talking about, having blinkers and blinders and petitions all around the office so that visual distractions can't happen. Phones don't ring and distract you. You can't be distracted by movement or other shiny objects. And it would just be a workplace that's just optimized for productivity and anti-distraction. You would also have other things in place if you were a maker, like, say, a secretary or a team that's designed to run defense on any distractions. They handle emails, they take random callers or visitors, and they only let people have access if it's an emergency or that they're pre-screened by the maker. And that would be the ideal workplace for someone who just wants to be left alone to be maximally creative and productive. But on the other hand, the perfect workplace for a manager would be almost entirely oppositely different. Managers become productive when they have lots of meetings, with each of those meetings put something in motion. And that way it's like they've got many sticks in the fire, they've got many executable things running in the background, and they're leveraging a vast majority of people in the background while they're making sure that everything's on track. And so the ideal workplace for a manager would probably be more of like an open air environment with some private rooms off to the side. What they could do is just go from person to person to person in close proximity and high density, take them into a private room, get an update on what's happening, give them some guidance, give them some other resources and connections they need, put them straight back in the workplace, and then go to the next person and the next person and the next person. That workplace would also be highly conducive to, say, phone calls, Zoom meetings, coffee catch-ups, board meetings, all the sort of things that managers need to do to meet, greet, and get people empowered and doing things in the background. And so that's my answer to what the perfect workplace is. It depends on if you're a maker or a manager. Cool. Now, we're going to go up to question 81. This is the hard one. Clarify in 2 with problem, option, solution. This is really at risk of becoming very verbose. And so we're going to try to minimize this by giving an answer up front and keeping problem, option, solutions really tight. So have a go yourself and then come back and see my answer. So the question is, question 81, would you rather be great at dancing or singing? So I'll say, just to clarify, you're asking if it's better in general to be great at dancing or singing, or are you asking if you were the best dancer in the world or the best singer in the world, which would be better? Say they talking about the pointy, the specific one. I'd say, okay, so if you were the best dancer or singer in the world, here are the problems that you would face. This is what you could do to minimize them, and this is what I'd pick, dancing or singing. So if you were the best dancer in the world, a lot of people would expect you to dance a lot. I think you'd have to travel, you would have to do lots of performances that would be very physically demanding on your body. And if you're the best dancer in the world, I presume you would also be very athletic, which means you'd be doing lots of jumps and flips and things that are difficult for the human body and other people to do. And that would be a problem because your body would burn out really quickly. Whereas if you were the best singer, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a voice that's going to strain over time. Your voice might need some rest every now and again, but you can also record your singing and it could proliferate really fast. And so I think singing has ultimately less problems than dancing. And if you did want to be the best dancer in the world, what are some options that you could do? You could always record yourself and put that sort of stuff up on YouTube. You could also, if you're the best dancer in the world, reserve your skills so that you only perform for the highest paying clients, so you can make it a scarce resource. And at the end of the day, I think that I'm not convinced that being the best dancer in the world would be the best thing. I think you'd have more longevity with singing. I think you'd be able to reach more people with singing. And I think that recording your voice and spreading it out into the world would cause more joy than if you were dancing. I think more people could listen to you in the car and other places rather than have to watch you. And that's why I'd prefer to be a better singer than a dancer. And it's cool, relatively concise. Compare your answer to mine. And now we've got we've got one question left, but we might do 91 and 100. And here, these questions are trickier than the average question. And so what we're going to do is not assign ourselves any structure in particular. We're just going to read the question and just go with our gut instinct based on all the practice that we've done so far. And so have a go yourself, you choose your favorite structure, and then play my response and see which structure I picked and compare the two. And if you feel like you picked the wrong structure, give the question a go again and try something else and see what kind of answer might come out differently. Okay, here I go, question 91. What is the most difficult thing you've ever apologized for? So just to make sure on the same page, do you mean what's the most difficult thing I've ever apologized for in the workplace or in my personal life? Let's just say the person says either, just pick the one best thing. Okay, I would say summary detail. So the hardest thing I've ever had to apologize for was the biggest mistake I've ever made in a workplace. And I'm happy to elaborate on that in more detail, but it ultimately was resolved well and amicably. And I realized that being honest was the most important thing. So they ask for more detail, I'll do this question again. So this is the thing I'm going to do sentence and then one hand, other hand. No, sentence and then problem, option, solution. So this is the thing that I found the most difficult to apologize for. It was a time when I was in charge of writing legal advice for a client. and I spent a lot of time trying to get it right myself, only to have missed something that I shouldn't have missed because I was a junior solicitor, and it meant that my partner and I had to work extra long hours in order to fix it. And so what the problem was is that I started off as being too arrogant. I thought I knew the answer to the question, and I wanted to be extended a bit of opportunity before my time to prove that I could do something. And so the problem is that I felt like I already knew the answer. I just went straight to the answer instead of looking at the law, looking at the facts, making sure I had everything and measured properly before I cut. And so that led to a big problem. Was I ended up writing this very long advice. But then because I missed important facts and details, the whole advice became worthless, because a little bit like in a mathematical equation, if you have two sides of the equation but you put a minus sign somewhere, the whole equation is just wrong because one thing was missing. And so that caused even more problems because we only had a set due date to do it. I'd wasted a lot of that time on advice that wasn't worth it. And so now my partner and I were the partner of the firm and I were in a hole about what we were going to do next. What options were available to us? Well, either I could have just admitted defeat and had the partner waste their weekend and family time feeling stressed doing it, or I could have admitted my responsibility and been consistent with the idea that I wanted to be extended more responsibility, and I therefore should be responsible for that and not just be someone who can get it wrong and then not suffer any repercussions. And so that's what I did. I apologized. I said I had a 3-step apology. The first thing that I did was I admitted what I did wrong. The second thing I did was empathize with the partner to say like how it's affected them. And the third thing I did was be as generous as possible with the things that I would do to make amends for that. And because of that, even though the situation was frustrating for everyone, it became an effective apology because I did all the steps that needs to be done to satisfy a good apology. I didn't try to abscond responsibility. I didn't try to defend an unjustifiable position. Even though I put myself and my partner in a really big mess, I did all things that I could to repair that relationship and also repair that problem. Cool. And so compare your answer to mine. I just made that up off the top of my head. It's not even a real example. But that's an example of the use of first, clarify, and summary detail to retain lots of flexibility on a difficult question, and then sentence and problem option solution to give myself a really clear and persuasive and insightful answer. Cool. I think we'll leave it there for now. There's a lot to chew on in that particular exercise. We've just gone through a number of questions, becoming very flexible at the different ways that we repeat and count, and then also finishing on a very hard question and picking something that's intuitive and makes sense to that situation. So continue to practice these, compare your answers to mine. You can redo this recording as well and see how you go. And the more you do this, the more you improve. Eventually to a point it becomes effortless and it's weird not to do it correctly under great pressure. Thanks so much. See you at the next one.